Welcome to Appreciations, a production of One Week Critique, an Iowa-based arts and education nonprofit that offers educational resources and editorial support to students and teachers of the literary arts. You can learn more about us and our programs or support our work by visiting our website, oneweekcritique.com. That's the number one, weekcritique.com. And please like and subscribe to help us continue producing valuable content. Appreciations is designed to celebrate and continue sharing published pieces by writers without a full-length book, as well as the labors of love journal editors undertake in order to create a forum for reading, consideration, and recognizing the excellent works of writers of all kinds. We're inviting journal editors to sit down with us and share some of their favorite new work from peer publications issued in the last year. Please enjoy these conversations. Use them for yourself or for your classrooms. And of course, read, subscribe to, and support these fine magazines. I'm Matthew Schmidt, joined today by Virginia Bell. Virginia Bell won a Chapter 1 competition sponsored by Arch Street Press in 2001, won the Creative Nonfiction Prize from Nell in 2020, and received an honorable mention in the River's Edge 2019 Poetry Prize, judged by Jose Antonio Rodriguez. Bell's poems, essays, and reviews have also appeared in Hypertext, Kettle Blue Review, Fifth Wednesday Journal, Rogue Agent, Gargoyle, Spoon River Poetry Review, Poet Lore, the Keats Letters Project, Blue Fifth Wednesday, Wicked Alice, Cider Press Review, and Voltage Poetry, among other journals and anthologies. Bell is the author of the poetry collection From the Belly, out on Sibling Rivalry Press, and serves as co-editor of RHINO. She holds a PhD in comparative literature and teaches at Loyola University Chicago. Welcome, Virginia.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. Really appreciate the invite.
Of course, we're glad to have you here. And we thought we'd start off by talking a little bit about the journal that you co-edit, RHINO Poetry. How did that begin? How has it changed? And what types of work does it publish?
How long do you have?
Plenty of time.
A very long story. So RHINO started in 1976 in the Chicago area. And apparently it was a group of women who got together to exchange poems, right? Just a grassroots poetry workshop. And then they started hosting free workshops at local public libraries. And then they started gathering poems from the workshop participants and, mimeographing them, right? And stapling them and passing them out. And a couple of years later, they incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit. And so what's happened is that the grassroots, all volunteer collective nature of RHINO has stayed the same. All these, 46 years. We're not affiliated with a university or any other governing, organization, which has its pros and cons, right? Very much remains a labor of love, like you said in the intro. But what's changed is that the journal just grew in, for lack of a better word, professionalism, without getting stodgy. Grew in like production quality, right? So now it's at the highest level of physical production quality, and grew in reputation, I think, from being a kind of neighborhood journal to a Chicago area journal, to a regional journal, to now a national and international journal. So we're really proud of that history, and we're proud that we remain largely a grassroots collective. I could say more, but that gets us started, right?
And yeah, and you only publish poetry, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we call ourselves RHINO Poetry, but we are interested in flash fiction of 500 words or less. And, I also write creative nonfiction myself, and several of us do. So that boundary between what is a prose poem, right? What is flash fiction, or what is even a flash personal essay, right? Flash nonfiction. Those boundaries, I think, are blurry and in a really exciting way. So if if your listeners or viewers want to submit, we want to see anything 500 words or less, even if it's in prose. And with poems, with lineated poems, we will sometimes look at long poems. The majority of what we publish are shorter, like most journals, 1 to 2 pages. But we do occasionally publish a 5-page lineated poem, on rare occasions even longer, or hybrid works in sort of visual art, that emerging genre where visual art and poetry are meeting up. In the 2021 issue, we published a multi-page erasure poem, but it's the way we produced it was like visual art. So the poet sort of photographed the origin text, so you can see the page and like the binding of the book, and then erased certain words, right, and doodled some things, right? So there's a little bit of color, and so we're excited about that. We want to see all that kind of genre bending work.
And would you say you have a particular type of poetry? I know that's kind of a difficult question to answer, but is there any sort that you're really looking for?
Not in a narrow sense, right? And that is a difficult question, but it's a fair one, right? For folks who want to read a journal or submit. And it's something we wrestle with every year when we have reflection meetings, because we are a collective of 15 people with eclectic tastes in the best sense of the word. And we do welcome both traditional and, wildly experimental work. But I would say that that what we're looking for is work that surprises us, moves us emotionally, but also makes us think, that is defamiliarizing on all of those levels, right? In form and feeling and thought. And that shows a love affair with language. I mean, I guess that goes without saying, right? For anyone interested in literary arts at all, but that really shows a love affair with language and takes some risks, but not just to be gimmicky, right?
Yes, indeed. So the work you've chosen to highlight today is Near It by Tawanda Mulalu, and that was published in the Night Heron Barks. So what is it about the Night Heron Barks that you enjoy? And how did you first come across this journal and poem?
I was thinking about this before our discussion today, and something kind of surfaced, I think, from my unconscious mind to my conscious mind that I hadn't thought about before, which is that there's a kind of natural affinity between our two journals because of this loose metaphor of the animal in the title, right? And the Night Heron Barks, the night heron is an animal that has some really interesting qualities, and it barks at night, and it has a lot of different songs and sounds, right? So it becomes kind of a loose metaphor for a poet, right? Or for poetry, and that it's an unusual heron, right? It's patient, it sits still and waits for its prey, right? For its inspiration to come. It adopts the chicks of other birds, things like that. And is known by several different collective nouns. I was looking on their website this morning just to see: battery, hedge, rookery. And one of the things with rhino that we always play with is that the animal rhino is known as a crash. So I think unconsciously I was sort of drawn to that affinity, the playfulness of these kind of loose animal metaphors for poets and for poetry collectives. But beyond that, to tell the story, the founding editor of the Night Heron Barks, Rogan Kelly, was a friend of a friend. So as soon as he launched the journal online in 2020, I think I wanted to check it out and support him. And the other, he now has a whole cohort of fellow editors on his team. And then some of my friends really just coincidentally were published in the first year's issues. So, and then I submitted and they published a piece of mine, right? So the affinity naturally grew. And then last year at AWP in Philly, I read with them in an offsite reading, and so did Tawanda. So,
Oh, yeah.
and I had read Tawanda's poem online and liked it, but you know, there is nothing like seeing the person perform their poem. And it was, I loved the reading in general, and Rogan hosted really beautifully and put together a really wonderful group of people. And there was a lot of support in the room. And, you know, it was one of those exceptional readings, right? Where people were very present with each other and felt very real. And so then I went back to Tawanda's poem with a deeper appreciation, and, you know, I've enjoyed spending time with it. The other thing I would just say that really distinguishes the Night Heron Barks from RHINO and from other journals, I mean, we're a print annual, although we follow up our annual with an online archive of past issues. But they're a completely online journal, and they're taking full advantage of that. So their website's gorgeous. They pair work with visual art really nicely, and they publish all the poems in audio version as well as print. And I know that they're very dedicated to that. You know, part of their mission or their intent is to revive the spoken tradition of poetry. Right? It was originally an oral song, right? So if that's what lyric is, and to break down that distinction between, say, spoken word and page poetry, right? Just to throw that distinction out the window and revive the oral art. And so they're, you know, they're taking full advantage of that audio medium.
It's true. Yeah. The way one of us would read someone else's poem is inherently different than they would read it aloud to an audience, simply because, I think for one thing, there's a rhythm in their head already of what they're going of why they wrote it the way they wrote it, of where the line breaks are, and those types of things. And so it is really nice to get to hear it read aloud. So let's actually listen to Tawanda read this poem on the website. Here is Night Heron's website. And as you said, very beautiful art here all the way around. And here is Tawanda reading the poem.
Neared. Please no longer the need to be harmed by colors. The streets in this continent change as easy as fingernails latching onto me when you breathe like this. Press hard. Your skin bruises easy as leaves. I watch leaves cold now while lonely cars glide past the playground. No matter this light that flees early, I allow myself this. I amass a nest of smaller rays. The birds do their final gathering, and I am gone again, returning for the rest of this day. Here, an old tree by this fence, an old tree by this fence, by this road. Gravel intermingles above soil with newer reds, revealing themselves as leaving to beneath roots. Shall I press myself against brick? Pretend, yes, that I was here, will here, beneath feet, beneath brick, beneath leaves above you. Will hear all along the mass of days in which another dry conflagration falls into this box of tissues and sanitizer, leaves then my kids' hands, finally quiet in the classroom. Masks. I clean their hands and think again of their minds, stumbling across mathematics. Imagine the soft marvel of another planet where other minds do not stumble, cannot marvel, cannot I, but only sing. One song, and I am the last thought on earth. The fantasy of Schubert's four hands, I am not dying. I am not immediately dying. Why do not know that I will. But a backache, the doctors scan my heart and find my right ventricle might be thicker than it should be. The left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood to the body. I am so close to safety, I could confirm it now. In my chest, a dream gone, breathing.
All right. So, an excellent reading on the website. What is it that excites you about this poem?
The sound and the mysteriousness of what it's about. You know? It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't tell you. The title near it immediately gets me asking near what, right? I don't know what the referent for it is. And so already I'm kind of on a treasure hunt to figure that out. And then as each stanza or each line or each image unfolds, it's like I'm wandering around a maze. I wanted to say rooms of a house, like stanza is a room, but it's more like a maze, right? Where I'm turning corners and I don't really know where I am. And even when I find the exit, I kind of have to start all over again to think about it. And along the way, there's just beautiful musicality and double entendre and plays on words. So you've got the musicality of near, reveal, need, breathe, leaves, fleas, tree, beneath, right? That EA sound repeating itself throughout. And then you have that central pun on leaves and leaving, right? And leaving being both something that trees do, they make leaves or they drop leaves, but leaving as in exiting, departing, going away. So, and then when I reread it, when I try to puzzle it out, even though I love lyric poetry, I guess it's just natural to try and figure out what's the narrative here, right? What's the narrative subconscious, right? How can I put a context in this that's kind of literal just to help my brain understand it? And I'm not worrying about what Tawanda Mulalu intended. I'm not trying to determine that. I'm just trying to create a narrative context for myself as the reader to make sense of it, right? And to parse it. And what I come up with is a speaker who works in a school and is on some kind of break, perhaps lunch break or afternoon break. So sort of wandering around outside by the playground, and it's fall, right? And the leaves are coming down, and it's pandemic time, right? Death is in the air, illness is in the air. It feels early pandemic, although kids are in school, but it feels sort of scary. And ultimately, it's about what so many poems are about, which is death. So that whether it's from the pandemic or anything else, we're all going to approach it sooner or later. And there are times of the day or times of the year when we're acutely aware of that. And both all of our sort of, that's a collective human experience or even botanical experience, but also an individual one. And the speaker reveals finally in the last stanza that he's worried about his own physical condition. So it is death, maybe. So that is a cliche topic for a poem, right? That is a well-trodden poetic theme. And yet this poem defamiliarizes my experience of thinking about that, which is a really hard thing to do, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So anyway, that's starters. I could go on.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. The near it title is defamiliarizing immediately, as you say. And, alternatively, what we could be near is also life, right? The opposite of death.
Right.
And as a teacher, right, the speaker is in contact with life that is upcoming, that is thriving, and yet, right, we have this pandemic, this illness that can, cut that life down at any time, and there's worry in the speaker about how that might happen, what they can do in this situation. And I also agree with your the idea of a maze that you say. I think even the way Tawanda reads this, it is really like it moves along, and then especially when we get to "I am not dying" and stop. "I am not immediately dying" and
Yeah.
stop. Right, there's those big pauses right there, and the reading really brings that particular moment out for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it flows, and then we've got those hard stops.
Yeah.
It's very nicely done there.
Yeah, and earlier in the poem, there's a couple of those too. Uh, where other minds do not stumble, cannot marvel, cannot I, but only sing. And the enjambment of that line, and then the but only sing and the hard stop. And what the speaker's also doing there in your examples and my examples is repetition with difference, which is part of the musicality, but it's also part of what keeps you moving through that maze and keeps the idea turning and changing. So an old tree by this fence, an old tree by this fence, by this road, and the picture slowly growing in your mind. Like, and the line you quoted, I love, "I am not dying, I am not immediately dying," changes everything to throw that word immediately in there. Another thing I wanted to throw out, if I may, is that on one level, this poem is using another very sort of well-trodden technique or trope, which is pathetic fallacy. So you've got fall and leaves and changing colors, and they're falling to the ground. And in many ways, that's, the poem almost risks cliche in that sense. This is a fall poem, and so we're going to think about that liminal space between life and death. But again, somehow defamiliarizes my experience of fall. Even though it's a well-known trope. And in that first line, like if we could just go back to that opening line after that powerful title, it's again very defamiliarizing and a hook for me. Please no longer the need to be harmed by colors. And stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sentence fragment. It's a plea, it's a prayer, it's a beg. There's a desperation, it's an ask to, I don't know who or what. And we don't know what it means yet to be harmed by colors. And I had this temptation to think, oh, this is going to be a poem about racial identity, which it could be also on some level, but turns away from that obviousness quickly. And the whole notion of what colors are or what they represent or how they can harm us is very complex, right? There's many different ways in which colors can harm us. And it's so defamiliarizing because we think of color as the very thing that nurtures us, that's lively, that's life-giving. When you move from black and white to color, it's like, springtime, right? So anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed this poem as well.
Yeah, no, I really did. And the first time I read it, I was kind of taken aback, only insofar as like I wasn't sure I grasped it immediately.
Oh, me too. I was totally confused the first
Yeah.
time.
And
Yeah.
so that is part of the rereadability of a poem is I think important insofar as it has more than one thing to teach you.
Absolutely. Or ways in which to move you. Yeah, I think when I read this poem online originally, I liked it, but was totally confused by it. Then when I heard Tawanda read it at AWP in Philly at the offsite, I was, I was, I felt the music wash over me, but
Mhm.
I still didn't have a sense of what it was about. it was really your invitation to have this discussion that made me sit with it and spend more time with it. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I have like, now I have a grasp. You reminded me that when we have our RHINO meetings around the table, real or virtual, sometimes it's like the Zoom table, and we discuss the poems that we're considering accepting for publication. I'll just reveal a little bit of this peek behind the RHINO curtain here. One comment that frequently comes up is, would I want to reread this poem? That re-readability, I love that phrase you said, that word you said, because that's a plus, not a minus.
Right.
It's not, oh, we get it on the first read, so we want to publish it. It's, if we get it, if we think we get all that's there on the first read, there's not enough there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think it is about complexity that you would consider a plus?
Well, I think it's a pleasure, right? It's a pleasure to cogitate, to think about something, to let it sit with you for a little while. Like the first time you hear a piece of actual music and you're drawn to it, people get obsessed with songs and they listen over and over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And only the best songs really warrant that kind of addiction.
Yeah.
And you hear a different thing every time, right? Or you notice something in the lyric or something in the sound or a change in rhythm that is pleasurable, and noticing it is pleasurable. So I think it's that, and I think that it's respect for the reader, and not thinking you have to spell everything out for the reader, but letting the reader engage in that process of the construction of meaning that might be different from the poet's intention, and the poet being okay with that. The poet freeing that up.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I think, to go back to your musical reference there, is that like when you hear a song you like or love, you want to go back and figure out what it is about that song that really pulls you in. Is it a particular instrument? Is it the lyrics? Is it the change in time? Whatever it may be, that really like makes you come back over and over, like you say. And it is, such a thing where they call the chorus or something like the hook, or like,
right, the riff or whatever.
Yeah, because it pulls you, it grabs you, and it won't let you go. And like with a poem like this, that is another layer of the complexity, right? It grabs you and says, hey, I've been pondering these things, and while there may not be a clear answer, here is my mindset and how I kind of walk through it. And isn't that kind of like what the world is like, where you're like,
Right.
well, why is my relationship with so and so somewhat muddled right now? Like, what happened?
Yes. Oh yeah, I like that parallel. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and for me, the hook in this one, it's a less obvious refrain. Some poems use more obvious refrains, but it's that central word of leaves and leaving. And there's other wordplay like that throughout the poem, like here, H-E-R-E and H-E-A-R, homophones like that. But that, I just keep wanting to know what is it about leaves and leaving. I was thinking too, while you were talking, about how when I was reading the poem to myself before our interview, that's like me covering a song, right? That musicians will do. And, I honor Tawanda Mulalu's reading the most, but my own has validity as well. And sort of how I phrased it differently. I'm a little bit obsessed right now with Sufjan Stevens,
Mm-hmm.
and all of his works. And I've seen him at Pitchfork in Chicago, and adore him. But his covers of Joni Mitchell songs, which for my generation was, they were really important to me when I was coming of age, and really young, even like at middle school, I was starting to listen to Joni Mitchell, right? And I don't listen to Joni Mitchell anymore because it's been too many decades. But when I hear Sufjan Stevens cover, there's a new life to that song, and a new interpretation of it, and a song that can like produce great covers like that, right? Like what's his name's cover of Hallelujah, of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah? Jeff Buckley's.
Yep.
I like it better than the original. I shouldn't say that, but
Well, I mean, but isn't it somehow an extension of the original idea?
right.
So it has to pay homage to the original because the cover doesn't exist without it.
Right. Coverability is like re-readability
Yeah.
that you were talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's really. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just appreciating again that you invited me to talk about this poem because it made me fall in love with it more. I'm still a little bit mystified by a couple of things though, and I wondered if you had any answers. I'm a little bit confused about the second person you in the poem.
I don't know that I have an answer for that specifically, other than, you know, you talked about perhaps the speaker is walking around during a break and, thinking about their life. And so the you is probably an important person in their life. But
Right.
beyond that, I'm not certain, um, other than the only other person that it could be is Schubert. That's,
Oh,
based,
right.
based on what the poem is giving us. And
Yeah.
so perhaps the speaker is walking around listening to Schubert.
Oh, I like that reading.
And, like the four hands is maybe a little difficult for me to grasp, other than,
Me too. That was the other mystery for me, and I don't know anything about Schubert, and I didn't bother to look anything up, although I should have maybe.
yeah, no, I don't know enough about Schubert either. But either way, I love thinking about someone having four hands, especially a musician.
And I picture a piano player.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Because, when you watch piano players, sometimes they'll go like this, right?
Right.
Because they have to keep something going here, the rhythm, the through line.
Right.
They have to reach down here to go for some other notes.
And
And
it
so,
looks like they have four hands.
right,
Yeah. Or it sounds like they have four hands.
it sounds like it. I can't play the piano really, and
Me neither.
it's amazing to just hear one person playing all of those notes and melodies.
Yes. Yes. Well,
So
I like that reading, and it's interesting that you went from my question about the you to that, because those were my two primary mysteries. And the you, I think sometimes the you is also the stand-in for the I,
mhm,
like the speaker talking to themselves. And usually poems choose one or the other. There's a lot of poems that just stick to the you as a stand-in for the I.
right,
And this goes back and forth. And sometimes it seems like an actual individual you that the speaker has in mind. And then, of course, it's a way of reaching out to us, because whenever you read a poem with a you, regardless of what it actually stands for, it starts to feel like the poet's talking to you.
yes. I mean, the only, I guess while you were talking, I did think of another possibility. This may be a stretch,
Yeah.
but the you could be a godlike figure insofar as,
Yeah.
Schubert could be considered a god of
Right.
music or composition,
Lyricism.
lyricism. Yeah. And also, we return to the body at the end. And if part
Right.
of the body has been made too big or too small, that it doesn't operate maybe the way that is most efficient,
Yeah.
right? Then it's a question of, well, why was I made, born, created like this?
That's
Uh,
a wonderful reading, and it circles back to my idea that that first standalone line is a prayer or plea, or please, please, like you can almost picture someone falling on their knees, talking to, maybe some sort of God, big G, small G,
yeah.
Schubert, you know, whoever, whatever.
And one of the great things about please are that you can hear it as please with an E on the end,
Yes.
right? That's another one of those really cool things with language.
Yes. Yeah, which fits this poem, right? The two meanings. Also the poem moves from narrative distance to narrative closeness
Right.
with the reader. So not only are you kind of confused and mystified and defamiliarized at the beginning as the reader, but you feel like the speaker's not really letting you in, holding you at arm's length, and then stanza by stanza, line by line, and then finally telling you, like they're trying to work up to telling you what they really want to say, right?
Yes.
I'm not dying, I'm not immediately dying. And then the real reveal, right? The turn near the end of the poem. The doctor scanned my heart, like you were saying, and find my right ventricle may be thicker. That's scary. It's like, finally, that's the thing. Maybe that was what prompted all of it.
Yeah. And it also mirrors the particular way that you've described the poem as unfolding, with the narrative distance at the beginning, uh, and then the masks, right? Like
Yes.
there's that layer, and
Yeah.
then with the heart, right? There's the mask of skin and bone over the
Right.
heart, right? So it's very well constructed in the end.
Yeah.
All of these things falling into place, even if at first the reader is not sure exactly what's happening, they get to
Right.
peel back those layers, as it were,
Yeah.
to look at the content.
And I also noticed, like, as we were talking just now, those last two lines, or the last sentence that straddles the last two lines. I am so close to safety, line break. I could confirm it now. In my chest, a dream gone, breathing. So we're back to the it. Close to safety is like a translation of near it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the it changes in the next line. I could confirm it now. Again, we don't know exactly what it is. It's already changed from safety to something more unclear. In my chest, a dream gone, breathing. And I love it when poems do that at the end, where they simultaneously sort of click into focus like an old camera,
Mm-hmm.
and then open back out, right? And unfix the meaning again, right? So it's not too wrapped up in a tidy bow, but you're left questioning again.
Yeah, it makes me think perhaps the speaker had something they really enjoyed doing that involves strenuous activity, but right, this issue with the heart perhaps makes that an impossibility.
A dream gone.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, but we don't, again, we still don't know what that is.
And it could be not even a physical activity. It could be just that notion we have, especially when we're younger, most of us, not all of us, have this privilege of feeling like our bodies are absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And that's a dream that we all lose at some point, and some sooner than others, or some right away, right? But everyone at some point, even even if it's not death, right? We lose that dream of the perfect body, the perfectly healthy body. No
Yeah.
one is really, maybe that's a deconstruction of that able-bodied, disabled body binary that we walk around thinking about so often, right?
Yeah. No, it's tough. It seems that every few months something else goes out the window, right?
Absolutely. And I've seen this happen too, because I know a lot of young adults, and when they experience that, it's particularly jarring, because the young adult often feels sort of immortal
Yeah.
and physically, invincible.
Yeah, I always wonder if it's a cruel joke that we're most formidable so early in life,
Yes.
as far as our physical stature goes.
Right.
But then our brain kind of takes over
Yes.
that particular role
Right.
through the rest of the life.
Right.
It's a strange thing.
It is, and this poem bears that out because the speaker, despite their worry, their plea, right, the fear and the concern, maybe even the melancholy, is reveling in the language and reveling in the singing, you know. I but only sing one song, and I am the last thought on earth, the fantasy of Schubert's four hands. That's like really singing.
Oh yeah.
And a kind of indulging in a kind of wonderful, really wonderful self-aggrandizement.
Yes. No, it's amazing though. Yeah.
But you don't resent it as the reader. You're just there. Yeah, me too, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Virginia, for spending time with me and for your work in the field of journals and lit magazines. Be sure to check out RHINO, The Night Heron Barks, and of course, Tawanda Mulalu. Thanks again, Virginia.
Thank you, Matthew. It was really a joy. It was really a joy. Thanks a lot for the work you do.
Certainly.